Before The Legend of Zelda took players into dungeons, before Elder Scrolls gave us that vast fantasy world, and way before Dark Souls tested our bravery, there was a small, surprising game that started it all. It didn't have fancy 3D graphics, it didn't have emotional music, or even voice acting. In fact, your hero was just a tiny square, but that square was about to take players on one of the very first real adventures in video game history. The year was 1980. And the world of video games was still young. Most games were about scoring points, like Pong or Space Invaders. You'd try to survive as long as you could, rack up points, and maybe beat your friend's high score. But then came something different, something bold. It was a game called Adventure, and it launched on the Atari 2600, a home video console that many kids were playing on their living room TVs. Now at first, Adventure didn't look like much, just a blocky world made of squares and lines. The player character was a tiny colored square. But once you picked up the joystick, you were no longer playing a game, you were actually on an adventure. You had to search castles, find magical keys, avoid deadly creatures, and retrieve the enchanted chalice, or the goblet like I like to call it. Your goal was to return the goblet to the golden castle. Along the way, you would fight off dragons, dodge a bat that stole your items, and uncover paths that weren't even marked. The game didn't just challenge your reflexes, it challenged your brain. You had to remember where things were, figure out how to open gates, and choose the right tools for the right moment. And for the first time ever, players had an inventory. That means you can carry items like keys, a sword, and use them to solve problems later. And at the time, Adventure also had something really cool, enemy AI. The dragons didn't just sit around waiting to be bumped into, they would actually hunt you down and chase you all throughout the castles. They would actually hunt you down and chase you all throughout the map. And to top it off, they even had a little bit of intelligence. They would actually guard certain items in certain rooms, giving you a reason to plan out your moves carefully. And then best of all, the biggest surprise probably to most people is actually this game actually contained an Easter egg. Now, when I say Easter egg, I'm not talking about the Easter Bunny. I'm talking about something hidden in the game that's either a nod to the creator, a nod to an old piece of history, that's in plain sight, but's not really in plain sight. So what was this Easter egg? And why did they put it into the game? Also, what seemed like a simple game was actually groundbreaking. And why? It gave players freedom to explore in any direction. It told a story without using words. And even though it only took up a tiny amount of memory, just 4 kilobytes, it proved that a great idea didn't need fancy technology to shine. So in today's episode, I'm taking you guys all the way back to the old school. We're going to take a deep dive into Adventure. We'll look at how it was made, what made it so fun to play, why it still matters today, and how to do that famous first ever Easter egg. And we got to keep in mind, for 1980, this was the beginning of a new way to play. The moment the video game stopped being about scoring points and started being about telling stories. So sit back, relax, and let's go back to 1980, where you can still smell the wood of those old Merman coffee tables with your Atari 2600 sitting underneath. This is the story of Adventure, the first video game quest. Now, to really understand the magic behind the video game Adventure, we have to begin with one man, Warren Robinett. In the late 1970s, video games were still young. Companies like Atari were leading the charge, creating simple but exciting games like Pong, Breakout, and Asteroids. These games were mostly about getting high scores and reacting quickly. They were fun, but they didn't tell much of a story. And that's where Warren Robinett was different. Robinett wasn't just another game developer. He was a thinker, a dreamer, and someone who wanted more than just the bouncing balls and blinking dots. One day, he played a game that completely changed his life. It was called Colossal Cave Adventure, a text-only computer game, and Warren loved that feeling. And then he had an idea, a really big idea. He thought, what if I could take this amazing adventure and turn it into a real-time game with moving graphics on the Atari 2600? At the time, this idea seemed almost impossible. The Atari 2600 was a very simple machine. Let's take a look at what Robinett was working with. It only had 128 bytes of RAM, not megabits, not even kilobits. And that kind of memory is so small that your average calculator today has more memory. There was no operating system, and that means programmers had to write everything from scratch. There was no way to save your game once you turned it off. All your progress was gone. The graphics were extremely limited. You could barely fit more than a few moving shapes on screen. The entire game had to fit on a cartridge that was less than 4 kilobits, smaller than a modern email. Most people would have looked at this limits and said, nope, we ain't doing it. But not Warren. Warren didn't see limits. He saw a challenge. He believed it was possible to make an adventure game even with such tiny tools. So he rolled up his sleeves and got to work. Over a course of a year, Robinett wrote every single line of code by hand. He designed the game's entire world, which included 3 castles, each with its own color and purpose, dangerous dragons that look more like ducks, but could chase and eat you. Magical items like the sword and a bridge that lets you cross through walls. A huge maze carefully built to make players feel lost and excited as they explored. And he made it all fit in a tiny little 4 kilobit cartridge. No one had ever done anything like that on Atari before at that time. Robinette made one of the first action-adventure games ever created. So he didn't just ask a bold question, he answered it with something unforgettable. And little did he know, he was about to make history in more ways than one. So let's talk about the gameplay. In Adventure, you don't play as a person, you control a tiny square, known only as Hero. Your mission is to recover the enchanted chalice and return to the Golden Castle. But of course it's not that easy. The chalice is hidden somewhere in a world filled with locked castles, dark labyrinths, deadly dragons, magic items, and a bat that steals whatever it wants, not necessarily whenever it wants. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. The game takes place in a non-linear world, meaning you can go anywhere at any time. And there's no time limit, no score, no lives. You just explore, find objects, and solve problems. At the time, guys, this was revolutionary. I mean, we're talking 1980. I mean, this is a time where there was nothing to really base it off of, like, quests and like Zelda. I mean, you did have a few PC text games, but to see this thing come alive and move around, in real time as an actual game, I mean, that was huge. I remember playing this game when I was a kid, and that was some moons ago. I remember I was about 6 or 7 when I played this one, and it blew me away. It was just like, it was kind of even scary at the time, because back then, TV was kind of limited, what you could watch back then in the 80s, the early 80s anyway. So to see something chasing you around the screen in a video game, and just the way the dragons moved and everything, for a 7-year-old kid, that was a big deal. I mean, that was huge, very impactful. Now, let's talk about the enemies. Now, the dragons, that's what these are. These are dragons. I felt like they look like dragons to me. Now, they look weird, but, they just kind of had their own thing. Most people nowadays say they look like ducks. I never got on that bandwagon. I still feel like they look like dragons, but that's what I'd known them as since I was a kid. So the duck theory kind of came later on, in my adulthood. That's what I started hearing when they revisited Atari. They said they look like ducks. I always thought they looked like dragons, but, that's debatable. And you have to forget, it's Atari 2600, so what do dragons look like? When most people think of dragons, they think giant, fire-breathing monsters with wings, claws, and sharp teeth. But in Adventure, the dragons look more like, to popular belief, rubber ducks. Now, there were games out there that actually had some pretty good Atari dragons. Magic had a game called Dragonfire, and the dragon runs along the bottom while you pick up all the... Magic just had great graphics for Atari if you were around back then. But that dragon looked pretty cool. It would shoot fire up in the air at you while you run around and grab all the treasures in the room and get out. So, yeah, I can kind of see where people say ducks. I still say dragons, but yeah, if you want to see a good dragon, play Dragonfire for the Atari 2600. So anyway, with their round heads and long necks and bodies that bent like bathtub toys in some ways, these dragons really didn't look scary at first. But don't let their silly appearance fool you. These duck-like dragons are actually dangerous enemies. If they touch you, and I mean they eat with their head, if you touch them anywhere, like their tail or anything like that, it'll register as them eating you. Your little square character disappears completely, and it goes into their stomach. So you can actually move around in the stomach as you after you've been eaten, which, I don't know, you're dead, but you're not dead. I don't know, the game's over though, but you can reset the game. And we'll talk about that in a minute as well. So there's 3 dragons in the game, each with their own personality and behavior, and that was huge at the time, but the dragons being different. First up, you had Yorgul, the yellow dragon, and he's probably the least aggressive of the group. Yorgul tends to wander around alone, and he won't chase you too hard. He'll try to keep up with you, but you can actually outrun him. But don't get too comfortable because he pops up in weird spots. And one of the things about Yorgul, the yellow dragon, he does have a few, or at least one quirk. For some reason, he's scared of the yellow key. So if you bring the yellow key in the room with him, he'll take off. Okay, so I don't know why, but he is scared of the key. Maybe it's the mouse and elephant theory. I don't know, but that's one of his quirks. Next up, we got Grundle, and he's the green dragon, and he's the same speed as Yorgul. They're both pretty slow, and they move, and but he's kind of he kind of does his own thing. He does guard more items. He guards the magnet, the bridge, and the black key. Now, all 3 dragons do guard the chalice as well. So what I mean when I say they guard something, I mean that they stay in the room with it. So let's say you got the magnet, it's in the room, and he's in there, and you don't pick it up around the room. He won't chase you out the room. He'll just stay in the room with something he's guarding. So if it's Grundle, it'll be like I said, the magnet, the black key, the bridge, and the chalice. And lastly, we got Rendell, the red dragon. And this dragon is the fastest, smartest. I don't know if he's smartest, but he's just faster and more dangerous than all the rest. And he guards the most important items and is very hard to avoid at times. especially if he gets you in a cramped space. Now, the thing with Rendo makes him different is he guards the white key and he guards the chalice, and he moves pretty fast, and kind of you guys go the same speed on the screen. So him, the bat, and you guys all move the same speed. Now, I will show you real quick. Rendo is actually faster than you, and there's a part right here I'm gonna show you where if you're running from him, watch how he gets closer as you run through each screen. So as you pass through each screen, he gets a little bit closer to you. So in reality, he may be just as fast as you sprite-wise on the screen, but if you are running from him, he can actually chase you down and actually get in front of you at times. So just be mindful. A lot of people probably don't know that, but yes, he is actually faster than your character. And I think the bat is the same way, but it's hard to test that theory with him. But we know for sure from this proof that Rendo is faster than our hero. So with that said, each dragon protects something like a key, the chalice, or whatever the item they might have. And luckily for you, you're not defenseless. You can fight them using the sword, which actually looks more like an arrow due to the Atari's limited graphics. Now, it might not look impressive, but it gets the job done. The moment you pick up that sword, the game becomes a thrilling game of cat and mouse, or in this case, duck and square, dragon and square, whatever you want to call it. And lastly, we got the bat. So just when you think you've got the game figured out, here comes the bat. And the bat in Adventure is one of the earliest examples of a designed character to annoy you on purpose, more like a troll. You know, he just trolls you out throughout the whole game. And this sneaky creature doesn't attack you directly. He can't kill you. Now, he can end the game, and I'll show you an example of that right here. Right here, what the bat does generally, he picks up items, okay? And he doesn't randomly pick them up. He usually holds on to something for a while. You can kind of trick him into picking up stuff you want him to pick up. So you can just wait for a while, and then over time, he'll, I guess, get bored holding what he has. And that's, I guess, is the game AI, and he'll pick up something else. So if you look right here, I'm in the White Castle, and the only way to get across it was the bridge, but he's in the castle with me, and he swipes the bridge. Now, yeah, I can grab him and, you know, put the bridge back and make him, you know, do what I want. But if he would have swiped it and went diagonally, I would have been stuck on this side of the maze, and I would have been stuck and game over. So he can't technically physically kill you, but he can set you up for failure. For example, he can fly around with dragons, and he can actually have the dragon as a, I don't think he intentionally uses a weapon, but if you touch the dragon while he's flying with it, you can actually be eaten by the dragon with him carrying it around. Because you gotta remember, in this game, programming is loose. So yeah, crazy stuff can happen. So later on in the video, I will show you some of my personal things that really made this game special to me, and some of the cool things that stand out in this game, and some of the things you can do. So let's continue. So the bat flies around across the screen at random times and swaps items around. You might be holding the sword, feeling confident, and suddenly, whoosh, the bat snatches the sword out of your hand and leaves you holding the dragon instead. Yep, that happens more often than you think. And sometimes he might steal keys you just found. Sometimes it flies around with dragons in his claws. Other times it just drops something you need in the middle of a maze. So it's unpredictable, frustrating, hilarious, and sometimes you get just stupid luck. But what also makes Adventure special is it was one of the first games to add this kind of randomness. I mean, the bat actually acts like its own character in some ways, not just following rules, but kind of doing its own thing. And it created a feeling of chaos, surprise, and just randomness. And believe it or not, this kind of behavior would actually later inspire characters in other games who aren't necessarily enemies, but still give you a hard time. In a way, I have to say, the bat was the first gaming troll. So now we got the characters out the way, let's talk about your inventory. Now today, most games have inventories. I mean, you hit the start button, your inventory pops up, you have sub menus and all that stuff. But back in the day, 1980 time frame, that was a new concept. It was pretty much unheard of for an inventory. I mean, you might have one item, but you can have, and you didn't have an inventory screen. You just had stuff you could pick up, and it was kind of what you'd carry around with you. And it wasn't organized and put together neatly like it is today. It was just kind of, you found something and you ran with it. So let's talk about the key items. First up, you got the sword, and that's your main way to fight back against the dragons. It's pretty simple. You touch the dragons with the sword and they die. Now, one thing to note though, if it's too many objects in the screen, your sword actually becomes useless, and you know, you can't, and with all the clipping and animation, the dragons just go through the sword and don't die. Another thing is, if you hit the difficulty button, the A difficulty button, I forget if it's left or right, but the dragons will actually fear the sword. So actually, when you bring the sword in the screen, the dragons will actually run off the screen. And that can be good or bad. They're harder to kill, but you can actually use the sword as a shield to keep the dragons out the room. So it can work for you or it could backfire. And next up, we got the keys. You have a gold, black, and white keys, and each one opens a different castle the castle of its color respectively. And without the key, you're stuck outside. So you can't just, even with the clipping and everything, you still can't just walk through the castle. You have to have the key for it. Next up, we got the bridge, and this is a pretty cool item in the game. It lets you cross over walls, through secret spots, and reach areas you couldn't reach before. It's like walking through the air. You just kind of put it on something, walk through it. Then we got the magnet, and this clever tool pulls items towards you, even through walls. I mean, you can, if you watch right here in this example, Rendell's up there guarding the chalice. So I'm going to stick the magnet up here and it's going to pull it down and he's going to follow it. You know what I mean? So, which is pretty cool. So if you're in a tight spot like that, you can actually use the magnet to that advantage, or if something's stuck in the wall, you can use the magnet to pull it out. So definitely a very valuable item. So these tools gave players the ability to explore, solve puzzles, and make decisions. And they definitely laid the foundation for future games like Legend of Zelda, Metroid, and even more modern titles like Resident Evil. I mean, the idea that you could pick something up in one place and use it in another, simple as it sounds today, was revolutionary at the time. So let's talk about the mazes and levels. Now, this was a game that changes every time you played it. Adventure wasn't just one map or one mission. It had 3 different game modes, and each one added new challenges. So to explain game one was kind of like your introductory level. You had the whole map was a lot smaller, or the world I should say was smaller. It was missing. It didn't have the White Castle. It didn't have the labyrinth at the bottom. It was replaced with just one room. The Black Castle didn't have the labyrinth at the top. It just had the one room. I think it was 2 rooms in there. And it only had 2 dragons. You had Yorgel and Grundle, the green dragon and the yellow dragon. And the bat was not in this version, so in this particular game. So this was basically your starter, just to get the feeling of the game. And that was pretty ingenious at the time to have that starter level, or in this case, easy mode for a game back in 1980. It was just a very cool thing. Next up, we had level 2, and level 2 basically had everything in the game. Was the complete game, but it was set a certain way every time. So to beat that one, the bat always started off on the side of the castle. Rendell was always in the black castle. Yogurt was always just floating around randomly, and Grundle would always come. If you watch me go down this example, go down to the bottom, because you have a pattern for it, he'd always show up and get killed right away. So level 2 had everything in it, but it was always set up the same. Now, variation 3 is obviously the expert level, and this one was so cool because at the time there wasn't really a game that I had played that had replay value, and there's games now that don't have replay value. You play it once and it's the same game every time. Even blockbuster hits are the same every time. But Adventure in 1980 gave you replay value. I mean, it was the first, if you will, roguelite kind of game in some ways. What I mean by that is a game that's kind of, the levels, the constructs of the game are the same, but there's random things different time every time you play it. So if you know what a roguelite game is. And Adventure was actually that game. You know, it was the first one like it. So that was huge at the time, you know. So level 3 gave you everything in the game, and it just had randomized stuff. Now, one thing I will tell you about playing level 3 as well, sometimes with Atari's limited programming capabilities, things would be missing. So you'll get an unwinnable game. So let's say, for example, the chalice is locked in the Black Castle, but the game doesn't give you the black key in that variation, that random variation. You can't beat the game. And they are actually, and I thought that was BS. I said the game's a computer, it always gives you everything you need. No, there's times where I've played through the game and actively searched to find the item I needed, and it was just not in the game, and it made the game unwinnable, you know, just impossible to win. So that does happen every now and then. So, but yeah, just the fact that they had that was huge. So let's talk about this Easter egg. And this was like, you know, groundbreaking at the time. And we have to figure, and now, so I have to ask, I mean, so I'm sure we're curious, why did Warren put this Easter egg in? Okay. So basically, Atari had a strict rule. No programmers could put their name in the game. The company didn't want fans to know who made the game. They wanted all the credit to go to Atari. But Atari creators, such as Warren Robinett, didn't like that rule. So he secretly added the hidden room to the game. To find it, players had to do a series of things. And I'll show you right here how to do it. You had to discover a tiny gray dot hidden in a part of the game, and it's in the Black Castle in the middle room that flashes. So you use the bridge to pass through the solid wall, get the dot, you bring the dot back to a secret spot. Basically, it's one level down from the yellow castle and one room over to the right. And it's a wall right there. So you bring that dot there, you drop the dot, then you have to bring another object in the room. And once you do that, you you can pass through that wall, and then you're treated to this Easter egg right here, where Warren Roundabout basically has his name. It says created by Warren Robinett, and so he put it in there anyway, and I thought that was super cool. Now I'm gonna be 100% honest with you guys. I did not know about this Easter egg till I was an adult. But I will say, if you ever played Adventure and you played as much as I have, you know that whenever there's two objects in the room, it'll flash. They'll flash slow. And the more objects you get in the room, the more clippier the rooms get with the objects. But if it's just two items in the room, for the most 2 to 3 items, it will flash. So it's times where I pick up the goblet, I'm going through the castle with the goblet, and the room flashes. At the time, I was like, oh, there's something in this room, you know, but I'm not going to sit here and BS you and tell you I knew what it was. I just knew it was something weird about that room, that it flashed. Basically, when the room's only flashed when there's 2 more objects or sometimes 3 objects in the room, that it was flashing, but I was only carrying 1 item. So I did find that weird, but not in my wild. I'm not going to sit here and BS you. In my wildest dreams, I had no idea as a kid that it was. I didn't know what an Easter egg was. I had no idea that you could pick something up. I had no clue. I just knew the room was weird, that it would flash. And I did think maybe something was in there, but I couldn't find anything. And I never would have thought to use the bridge to go down and get it. So I can't sit here and say I knew about the Easter egg. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is I did know there was something weird about that room. So I did find out as an adult at the end, later on, to find out that's the case. So, but yeah, it's kind of like I was saying earlier. You see it, but you don't really see it. You know something's there, but and when I say that, I mean like you know something's different. And now it makes sense in hindsight why that room was flashing. So that was a big deal. And I thought it was just a glitch in the game, but it was actually an Easter egg. So yeah, that's huge. So this secret room is now known as the first Easter egg in video game history. Players were amazed, and when Atari found out, they were shocked, but they decided to leave it in future copies of the game. So that single hidden message started a trend. Today, Easter eggs are everywhere in games, from funny messages in GTA, the secret rooms in Halo, and it all began with Adventure, so give them props. So the legacy, the blueprint for every quest adventure may look simple today. Few blocks, a dot, and some mazes, but underneath those graphics is something incredible. It was the first console game to combine exploration, combat, puzzles, and items in one experience. And it helped create the action-adventure genre, which would become one of the most popular types of games in the world. And that would be games like Legend of Zelda, Metroid, Tomb Raider, Skyrim, even Minecraft. I mean, all those great games owe something to adventure. It showed that players wanted more than just high scores. They wanted to explore, solve mysteries, and go on a journey. And even today, game developers mention adventure when talking about game design. I mean, it definitely proved that video games could be more than just reflex tests and could be interactive stories. So what are my final thoughts on adventure? So I'm gonna show you real quick before I end this video, just some of the important things that I loved about adventure and why it was special to me. For the simple fact, you could play the game any way you wanted. It had like, I mean, each dragon kind of had its own personality wise, and some of the things you could do that were cool, like with the dragons, like if you got 8 by them, you could, with the bat carrying the dragon, the bat can pick you up and you can actually fly through the whole, you can kind of see through the eyes what the bat would see when he flew around, how you can get through the screen so fast. Like if you got 8 by the dragon while the bat's carrying you, the bat would actually carry you around the screen, carry you throughout the mazes. So that was a cool touch. I also like the fact that you could get, one of the big challenges was trying to get all 3 dragons in the room and just try to dodge the dragons as long as you could. I mean, that was a cool take. Another thing was trying to collect every piece of items in the kingdom and put them all in your castle. You know, so all the dragons, all the sword, every item you can have, with the exception of the chalice being last, you could put it in your room in the castle. Another cool fact was just the way you could evade the dragons. You had a couple of things you could do. You could push down against any kind of flat wall, like just pushing down, and the dragons couldn't eat you. They just keep, opening their mouth and closing it, and they could use like you could take a break or a safe defense mechanism. I also like the fact that you could outsmart the dragon. So if you're if they're chasing you, you can kind of duck in it. You can run through the back of their head, because that was that mechanism. They could, if you were coming towards the dragon going left or right, and they're coming back with their back of their head facing you, you could go like through their head pretty much and get to the front. You couldn't do it the other way because they'd eat you, but if you went the other way, you can kind of sidestep them. So what you could do was let them follow you out the screen. Once they followed you out the screen, just go backwards and go through their head, and they'd be out the room, and then give them a little time to go somewhere else. So that that was a cool thing. I mean, it was strategies, definitely strategies to this game. Another thing that I like doing, which is kind of useless, but I liked it. If you were trying to carry, because you couldn't carry two weapons at the same time, so I could line up both the weapons and just keep hitting them like that with your thing. Because every time you can either push the button and let go of your weapon, or your object you're carrying, or you can hit another object and it'll automatically change to the other object. So that's what I would do. If I'm trying to push two things at the same time, I just hit them both and just kind of push what I'm doing and carry two things at once, which slowed you down big time, but it was just cool to do. Another thing was locking the bat in the castle. That was another strategy. And what you would do is he could get stuck, because he just kind of flew around, so he could kind of get stuck somewhere. So a good strategy back in the day was you'd put him in one of the castles and just let go of him. And if he flew like in diagonal patterns, he'd be indefinitely stuck, or as we called it back in the day, locked in the castle. So he'd be stuck in there. Locked, or he just fly. Sometimes he'd fly straight across. So it depends, but he would get out though eventually. If you brought another object in the room, he'd shift and get the object you were carrying, and you'd break that cycle. But yeah, you could indefinitely lock him in castles. So that was some of the cool things that I noticed when I played Adventure. And final thoughts for me is this game is definitely my all-time favorite, and I put that on record, my all-time favorite for the Atari 2600, because it just did so much. And at a young age, like I said, this is when I was a whippersnapper. I was probably, about 6 or 7 when I played this one. And it just, the replay value, I mean, the fact, because back then games were kind of sacred. You didn't have a bunch of them. And when you found something that really drew your interest or gave you the option like Adventure did, where it could change every time, you're playing the same game, but you're playing with some of your favorite characters and you're getting a different adventure every time. That was a big thing. Another thing that I thought was cool was, if you took the bridge and put it under, you had the yellow castle and put the bridge underneath and went through it, you'd be indefinitely stuck on top of the castle. Also a cool part was if you push down after you beat the game. Two things: if you push down after you beat the game, you could on the controller you'd actually come up and your little hero will be running around in the screen select. So it'd be 1, 2, and 3, and the square could run around in that little area. I thought that was pretty cool. And another thing was, probably one of my favorite parts, probably the least impact was cool, was if you put the chalice into the castle, that's when the game's over. If you hit the select button, the game select button, it'll slow down that little, I get the end with the chalice, it beeps real fast. If you hit the select button, it'd go real slow. So that was a cool thing too. And so, yeah, and in Atari, also you could actually play fried Adventure. And what I mean by fried with an Atari 2600, the older systems, you could fry the system. And what you would do is you'd put the cartridge in and you turn the power off and on real quick. And sometimes it would scramble because it came on so fast, it would scramble the loading of the cartridge. I think at least how I think it worked. I just know it worked. And you could actually get a weird variation. Like sometimes the dragons will be backwards. Sometimes items will work. In a lot of games, you could do that, but back in the day, you could scramble, you could fry the game. That's what they call frying your Atari, frying the game. So I could talk a lot about the Atari. That was a great system, great console back in the day, but this video is long, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up. But that's my take on Adventure. Definitely a beautiful game, a masterpiece in my opinion. And if you've never played Adventure before, definitely give this one a shot, because I mean, it's a really cool game. I mean, it might not be much today, and you might look at it and be like, I don't want to play this garbage. But for a little bit of pickup and fun, if you were around when that game was out, it definitely probably holds a special place in your heart like it does with mine. So that's going to do it with Adventure, guys. Thanks for watching. As always, take care of yourself, protect your inner peace. God bless you, and catch you next video. Thanks for watching.